Welcome members, I'm Andrew Burtch. I'm the historian who worked on the War Games exhibition, and it'll be my pleasure to take you through the exhibit to show you some of the artifacts and experiences that you can expect on your visit. So come with me. So we're in the War Games exhibition now. The team's been working on this exhibition for 3 years, and we started with the idea of what are the historic interconnections between war, play, and games? And to do that, we divided the study into about 5 zones, and we're standing in the first of those zones right now, Zone 1, War and Games from Antiquity to the Present, showing the really long and interconnected history of war, play, and games, and also how some of these very old games are nonetheless games we play today. So first let's start with the oldest artifact in the display, this 2,500-year-old amphora from Greece, which was loaned to us by the Royal Ontario Museum. You'll see that on the design of the amphora, there are 2 figures. These are Ajax and Achilles, 2 heroes of the Trojan War. And they're taking a pause during the fighting. They've rested their lances on their shoulders. They place their helmets to one side to play a board game. And what they're playing, we think, is the game Patea, which is a very old war-themed game, the rules of which have largely been lost. But it really is an illustration, a very key illustration for us, of those very key connections between war, a terrible human activity, and play, which is something we do to distract ourselves and keep ourselves current. And it's one of the themes you'll see as we go through the exhibition. Behind me, you'll see perhaps a familiar game, though you may not think of it as a war game, which is the game of Go, which originated in China some 2,300 years ago, spread to Korea and subsequently Japan, and went around the world after that. And as you can see from the images, is still played today. Now, you may not think of it as a war game, but in fact, both players who are placing white and black stones across the game board are in fact warring for territory, seeking to encircle the other player, cut off their avenues of access, and at the end of the game, control the most territory on the board. Let's move on. One of the challenges for the exhibition team was that people have lots of different ideas about what a war game is. And so we wanted to, at the early stages, help to define that. So we cast a wide net in this exhibition. We're looking at the games that people play for fun, that are based on or have been shaped by war, but also the games that militaries have played for centuries to innovate, to adapt, to recruit, and to plan for future military operations. So in this graphic, we just kind of walk people through what it is that a war game is, whether you're looking at someone playing it for fun or someone engaging in the more deadly serious study and analysis of the craft of war. So now we've entered Zone 2, the World Wars. In this part of the exhibition, we look at how these colossal conflicts shaped the games that people played at home, but also how militaries turned to games as a way to plan for future wars, as well as to adapt and build on their tactics during wartime. I'm standing next to this artifact, which was loaned to us by the National Army Museum, the Game of War on Models. This was a war game that was played on a map with realistic scale and distances, as opposed to abstractions on games of war that we saw in Zone 1, like chess and Go. This was a very successful model of war game that was emulated and played across Europe and also in Canada, which ordered several sets of this type of war game from the British War Office in the 1880s. Of course, armies weren't the only ones simulating battlefields in the years before the First World War. Playing with toy soldiers or tin soldiers was very popular as well. And one of perhaps the most acclaimed miniature wargamers at that time was H.G. Wells, a British author and of such works as The War of the Worlds. And these are his models that were loaned to us by his family and used in the playing of his miniature wargaming rule set, Little Wars. In that, he proposed that little wars could be used to fight instead of big wars. Sadly, his book was published in 1913, the year before the outbreak of the First World War. We're now entering Zone 3, the Cold War. In this part of the exhibition, we look at the ways that people have used war games in the military and at home to simulate conventional warfare, but also to look forward to World War III and a potential nuclear war. During the Cold War, computers took on an ever-increasing importance in defense planning in modeling and simulation. And it wasn't long before these computers found their way into homes through game consoles and personal computers. In this part of the exhibition, we've reproduced the hit Atari game Missile Command, which is really a simulation of a Third World War, a nuclear war. You're a missile commander trying to intercept incoming waves of missiles from hitting your cities and eliminating them. Just like in a nuclear war, there's not really a way to win. You can just get a high score. We're now entering Zone 4, Games in the War on Terrorism. During the period that we're looking at in this part of the exhibition, games became a blockbuster activity, and often exploring war not from the vantage point of a general looking down at a map, but in the first person, in the boots of a soldier or commando operating in a battlefield. And some of the most popular games during this period reflected the wars of their time, the ones that were launched after the September 11th terrorist attacks, such as the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. For people familiar with the first-person shooter genre, they may recognize this layout, which is a weapon wheel. And this is how players in-game would select the often real-world weapons that they would use in their virtual battlefields. In these years also, games became an important venue for critical commentary on these wars as they were unfolding. So not just simply playing these games for enjoyment, but using the games as a method to comment on the ways that these wars were being fought and the tactics that were being used, and also to look at the vantage point of those who had no active part to play, such as civilians. We're now in the final section of the War Games exhibition, Zone 5, Gaming Global Insecurity. In this part of the exhibition, we look at how defense professionals have responded using war games to the unexpected, be it the changing balance in world powers, climate change, or the effects of a global pandemic. One of the artifacts we've used to illustrate this is Aftershock, a game designed in Canada, which simulates the response of militaries, the United Nations, and non-governmental organizations to an earthquake in a fictional country. Players have to allocate resources, communicate well with each other, and respond to outbreaks of epidemics and deal with things like donor fatigue. It's a very complex war game meant to simulate the chaos and disorder following a humanitarian disaster. I hope you've enjoyed the tour. I've shared with you just a few of the artifacts and experiences that the team has pulled together to explore the interconnections between war, play, and games throughout the centuries. I really hope you will come and visit, enjoy your visit, and thank you so much for supporting the museum.